Shalom, this is Rabbi Michael Panitz of Norfolk, Virginia's Temple, Israel, and I'm broadcasting to you from my home in keeping with Governor Northam's restrictions for the purpose of public health. If you were listening to an earlier message, you will remember that if you are facing me, then in a sense you are facing east, because behind me is the eastern wall of my house. And this tapestry is known as a mizrach. This is a Jewish custom, a wall hanging or other work of art that hangs on the eastern wall of a religious space, which keeps us mindful of Jerusalem. So I'd like to be speaking to you from the pulpit of the synagogue, and instead I'm speaking to you from home. That's a compromise. And you too are going to be involved in compromises in a very short period of time. You're going to be part of a Passover Seder. You may be hosting one, you may be a guest, as has been true in previous years, but this year it's probably going to be by video conferencing. Many of my congregants have told me that they've uttered the word Zoom more often in the last month than in their whole life up until that point. And I think I could say the same thing as well. So, compromises. That's what we're thinking about. What I want to tell you at this time is that the Passover Seder itself is a lesson in compromise. There are many rituals, many traditional actions that are part of the Passover Seder that we simply do from year to year. We remember how they've been done, we were taught them, we observed parents and grandparents performing them. It takes some study to understand where these customs come from. But when you study them, you'll discover that oftentimes there was a difference of opinion in the past, and what we have now represents an attempt either to split the difference or more often to encompass both opinions by what we do. And I'm going to demonstrate this with respect to three of the features of the Passover Seder: the number of cups of wine that are employed, the number of matzot that we employ, and finally what is known as the Hillel sandwich. So let's start with the number of cups. How many cups of wine are there? Well, the first answer is 4 cups. It's one of the famous fours of the Seder. 4 cups of wine. We make the kiddush on the first one. We finish the narrative on the second one. We use the third one when we say thank you to God for the food that we've eaten. And the fourth one is recited after we finish all the psalms of praise. But, someone will add, there's a 5th one. The 5th one we call Elijah's cup. Other people could add, well, now there's a 6th one, which is a Miriam's cup. And that is true. That's a nice new development in the Seder. But I'm going to talk here about the debate between 4 or 5. So the solution, which we're going to explore in a minute, is that we drink 4 cups, but we pour 5 cups. And in a moment, I'm going to tell you why we call that cup that we pour but do not drink the cup of Elijah. But for now, I want to tell you where the debate comes from. You probably know that beyond the Bible, our sacred source is called the Talmud, a rabbinic encyclopedia. This was compiled over centuries. It was copied by hand. And at a critical point in the Talmud, we have the following statement. Rabbi Tarfon says, for the 5th cup, the Seder celebrant finishes the recitation of the Hallel. The 5th cup, in the Talmud that you can take off the shelf, Tractate Pesachim, page 118a, it says, the 4th cup. But if you look in the manuscripts, you find that in Babylonia and in North Africa, those great centers of Jewish life, that text said 5th cup. 4th cup was only in the texts that appear later in the 11th century rather than the 10th or 9th or 8th centuries. And in fact, the fourth cup is more logical and smoother, which means that fifth cup was probably the original reading. What scribe would amend a logical reading to an illogical reading? It makes more sense that the fifth cup was the original text and that some scribes smoothed it out by saying fourth cup. So there may have been 5 cups, but the majority of tradition is 4 cups. So we want to take care of both opinions. We drink only 4. Well, we're commanded to drink at least 4. And we pour the 5th one. Now, why do we call it Elijah? Because in the Talmud, the debate is left a draw, no answer. And the Aramaic word is teku, meaning let it stand, tekum. But later on, someone said that teku is an acronym like NATO, and teku means Tishbi, the Tishbite. Elijah will address all unanswered questions. When Elijah comes, he'll let us know whether it's 4 or 5. The spirit of compromise. The second of the 3 rituals that, if we look closely at the ritual, we see an interesting difference of opinion and then a way to move forward, is the question of how many matzot do we have in our official stack of matzot for the ritual. Customarily, we have 3. And you could be a little bit cute and say, of course we have 3, because the matzah covers, the cloth covers that you can buy in the synagogue shop, they have 3 compartments. But of course, that's putting the cart before the horse. If we'd had 2, like we have 2 chalot of bread on Friday nights, then the matzah covers would have had 2. So we have 3. But was it always that way? And the answer is no. When we look at the history of this custom, we find something very interesting. The Jews of Israel, going back 1,500 years, always used to have 2 boards or maybe 2 wheels of matzah. That's it. And they would break one, and the one they would leave whole until the time came for the hamotzi. Why would they break one first? Because it says in the Bible that this is lechem oni, and the rabbis understand the word oni to mean poverty. This is poor man's bread. Poor people couldn't afford a whole loaf of bread at every meal. Poor people typically had a slice, a chunk, a leftover from the last loaf. So in honor of our impoverished ancestors and all they had to go through, the custom was, unlike Shabbat, when you have 2 whole loaves, on Passover, one of them is broken before you make the hamotzi prayer. And actually, it's a beautiful custom. Just like the maror reminds us of their slavery, the salt water reminds us of their tears, the broken bread reminds us of the slender resources on which they had to live. That was the custom of Eretz Yisrael. The Babylonian Jews had a different custom. They did what the Eretz Yisrael Jews did on weekdays, but if Passover's Seder coincided with Friday night, then, and only then, in honor of the Shabbat, they had 3 boards of matzah. 2 to remind us of the double challah of the Shabbat, and the 3rd one for the Passover reason I've just explained. And then it turns out that there's another opinion. The other opinion is that of the French and German rabbis. They're the ones who said what we do now, that we have to do 3 all the time. So notice that the French and German solution bypasses the old conflict of, is it 2 7 days a week, or is it 2 6 days a week and 3 1 day a week? We got ourselves to a new place. And sometimes that's how we move forward as well. The final example of compromise, and this is a different kind of compromise, is found in what's called the Hillel sandwich. You may be familiar with the ritual of eating maror and eating matzah just before we have the meal. We say the blessing on the matzah, 2 blessings actually, we eat the matzah. We say the blessing on the bitter herb, the maror, and we take the bitter herb, although it's quenched in the sweetness of the charoset, the kind of apple chutney food that we have with the maror. And then there's this ritual known as the Hillel sandwich. Hillel was a great rabbi. He lived a little bit over 2,000 years ago. And we are told that Hillel used to take the paschal lamb. This was when the temple was still in existence, so the lamb entree was part of the meal. And he would eat it on matzah with bitter herbs. So that's how he did it. But notice that Hillel didn't do it the way we do today, nor did his opponents do it the way we do it today. Here's what the Talmud says. It's page 115a of the tractate about Passover. Amru alav al Hillel. They said about Hillel, Shahaya korchan bevat achat ve'ochlan. He would take all of the Passover foods, the lamb, the matzah, the bitter herbs, he would sandwich them together and he would eat them. In fulfillment of the verse, you shall eat the sacrifice on, and he meant it literally on, not accompanying, but literally on matzah and bitter herbs. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, a later teacher tells us, Rabbi Yochanan tells us, Cholkin alav chaverav al Hillel. Hillel's companions disagreed with him. They said, no, Hillel, that's not the way you do it. So Hillel didn't have maror and korech, he just had korech, just the sandwich form. His colleagues didn't have maror and korech, they just had maror, the individual eating form. What do we do, and how is it a compromise? Like the opponents of Hillel, we eat the foods separately and with a blessing, because after all, they were the majority, and we follow the majority rule in such cases. But then we incorporate Hillel's way of eating it, sandwich style, but without the blessing. So in that fashion, we manage to find room for both opinions. So friends, I've given you 3 different examples of how the Passover Seder in its evolution reflects the need for compromise. You need to compromise, I need to compromise. Life demands that we compromise. It's not a failure of principle in order to find a way for all of us to live together. Let's take that lesson not only for the Seder, let's take that lesson for our lives in Passover and beyond. Shalom.